Appreciate everyone being here. It's been a minute since we've assembled. So we have a pretty light agenda today. Hopefully we can track through it fairly quickly. Can I get a motion for approval of the previous meeting's minutes?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I also need a motion to approve the November 10th meeting minutes. Can I get a motion on those?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any comments on the meeting minutes? All right, all those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, purchasing agent Lane will provide her purchasing agent report, which can also be found in your binder.
I just want to note that I know we've got a, we're kind of on a condensed schedule for this meeting, so all of the reports are in the binder for your reference. I'm not going to walk through every element of the purchasing agent's report, but I would like to just draw attention to a couple of things there. Related to staffing, we have lost one employee, one staff member in the procurement division. That is Mr. Jonathan Meadows. He's taken he's taken other employment outside of Metro government. We do have a new employee that has joined our team since this board last met formally for regular business, and that is Ms. Jan Harvey.
Hello.
She brings a wealth of experience, specifically in real estate transactions, but she's working in procurement in our procurement resource division, or group. We want to welcome Jan. Let's see. I would like to also just make everyone aware that we have physically moved since our last regular business. We are no longer, we're in Lindsley Hall, but we're not on the first floor. We are upstairs on the second floor, and that is part of an overall space renovation and reduction process for the entirety of the finance department. This final reduction process is going to result in it's going to be a smaller in-office footprint for the procurement division, and it'll include a number of drop-in spaces and hoteling processes where we'll have those spaces shared by multiple staff.
Sorry, personal privilege. I don't think I can do it enough, but since you're all in this room, just thank everyone that had participated in that relocation process. Moving is never fun. Moving work, never fun. And just moving upstairs is the most annoying kind of move. So thank you for your patience.
I'd like to note also that our disparity study process is fully underway. It is on track for completion. We had anticipated having our meeting regarding results of that disparity study prior to this meeting, which I'd hoped we could, present any information pertinent to the board, but that has been pushed back and rescheduled for next week. So the board will hear that at its next meeting. There were no protests or appeals during the period. And I would like to note as the final item that I'll call out on the report, that the procurement division joined the Harvard Kennedy School of Government Procurement Excellence Network, which is part of their government procurement lab. And joining this network really gives us keen access to resources provided by Harvard at the Kennedy School. We were subsequently nominated by the Procurement Excellence Network to participate in a leading city procurement reform cohort, which we applied for. We were accepted, and we have begun participation in that. If you know anything about the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, it really is the gold star for efficiency and process for government operations and et cetera, and best practices, innovation. And so we've been selected for participation. We've been engaging with Harvard on a specific procurement challenge for us. At the completion of the cohort, we will have a proposed solution to that challenge. And for us, the challenge that we've identified is work to address the lack of a robust contract management system and process for our departmental end users. We put contracts in place for them, but then they kind of manage their own processes for, contract management, which are not always the best. So a lot of departments do it well, but some departments don't because they just don't have sufficient procurement volume to really develop good processes. And so we're working with Harvard to identify some specific techniques and resources that we'll be able to scale out to departments. And the development of these are hopefully going to enable departments to compel vendor performance in a better way than they have in the past. So our project team visited Harvard for a week in May. We had access to a number of lectures and sessions by Harvard professors. We participated in pretty rigorous training at that session or at that convening, and we were able to work with other cohort members from other cities that are participating in the cohort. So it was an exciting opportunity. So we'll continue through this. It lasts for 6 months.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is a terrific resource, but also a terrific validation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a question on the disparity study? That will be a fairly dense report, assuming. What is the strategy around how this group kind of gets a bring down of what's in it? And is that something that we should do in advance of release, or is it appropriate after?
Going based on previous exercise, it's been after because the disparity study itself is filed with the clerk. It's presented to the finance director, and it's also presented to the mayor's office. And if we want to have a special call meeting around the release for this board to be briefed, there is an executive summary process that is part of that disparity study. We can certainly do that to make sure that, this board is up to speed on everything that's included in the report.
So is it appropriate to let us all post-approval, whatever, let us all read it and then decide if that makes sense or if we want the consultant to come in or whatever?
We can absolutely
work
do
for
that.
it?
We can absolutely
This
do
group?
that. I think, honestly, and I defer to Jeremy Fry's here and Christopher Wood's absence, if you've got any thoughts about that, but I think that that's appropriate because the consultants have historically met with and provided a briefing to Metro Council members so that they understand the content of the disparity study and what the findings, reveal and what they mean for Metro. So if we want to include the Procurement Standards Board as the recipient of such a briefing, I think it's entirely appropriate.
I'd appreciate that. I don't know how everybody else feels. If we just add it to the 30th agenda, does that work?
Which 30th is that, Judy?
I don't know. I may have made that up.
August 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It'll be, in terms of timing, do you recall the schedule for timing on this? I think that's gonna be really late.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever works.
I would recommend, I think, my perspective, I'm not a member of the board, I think that that's a great idea. But I think that you probably want to schedule a special meeting for it so that the information is not stale. Because by that time, it will have run the media circuit.
Whenever they're going to be in town to brief council, it feels,
Okay.
as long as it works for the group, timing, calendar-wise, I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Well, you can remember to make a note for Christopher.
Where's Christopher?
Christopher is returning from travel.
Oh, he is missed.
Zach is out of the country. And we have one person who's ill, so we want to make sure that they keep the cooties with them and not bring them to us.
Appreciated that.
So, but yes, and then the final item that I'd like to bring to attention, and Macy, I don't know if you and Tessa want to comment on this, but it relates to a public chapter that was signed into law by Governor Lee, I guess last month, or maybe it was in April. And it basically requires us to add a period for public comment to every board meeting. And I believe that we've got a good process that has already been approved by this board, but it's specific to regulations that are being promulgated. I would think that we can just extend that procedure to every meeting.
Is it at the beginning or the end? The public comment period?
It's prior to the meeting.
Prior.
So basically, we would post the agenda. We would identify a window for public comment. And then if people want to come to the meeting and actually address the board, we'd have to establish procedures for how long each person would be allowed to speak, you know, and how we would manage that process. Kind of like with the, benefit board, you know, the way that they manage some of those public comments that we saw at this most recent meeting.
I might be telling on myself at benefit board, because I don't know if we've been doing it right, but.
The most recent meeting, you guys, I think you
Okay,
did.
so we did a motion at that meeting to set the time of the speakers. So it's not something we have to decide in every meeting going forward, has to follow
No,
that.
and you don't even have to set a time. Like, if there's not a lot of people coming out, maybe we never really have a lot of public participation at these meetings. You can just let people talk. Now, we can, at a future meeting, say, we only want to have 30 minutes for public comment because we want to get to the rest of the board business. We can give people 2 minutes each to talk. You can do something like that if you want. But I think right now, you don't have to, as long as we've got something on the agenda beginning July 1, so for the August meeting or the specially called meeting, that outlines, this is the public comment procedure. And we can send you over some,
Examples for,
some
and then we
language.
would post that to the web along with the agenda. And I think this requires us to have the agenda posted also at least 48 hours in advance, which we do.
And I was gonna say, you all already do that.
I would
So-
certainly recommend that it's timed. I don't care if it's one person. I don't want them to have 30 minutes of talking time. So you still need to, if we have a 30-minute window, you still need to limit how much time each person can speak.
Yeah, I think, and the flexibility to decide how much time every meeting, instead of having to say, every meeting shall be, is helpful too. So I like that flexibility. I'm
Send
sorry,
you something.
I failed to acknowledge Tessa is additionally supporting, I'm guessing in your maternity leave.
Yeah, so Tessa will be covering these meetings while I'm out on maternity leave.
Thanks,
So,
Tessa.
and so she's learning about all things procurement right now.
So the, in your binders as well, behind my report, is a memo that was received from Macy and Tessa regarding this public chapter, this change in the law regarding public comment. So it's there for you to review at your leisure.
You don't need a motion, that'll just be something we do.
It's information, yeah.
Okay.
I think you'll need a motion at each meeting to adopt whatever the criteria are going to be for that meeting. Is that right?
If you want to change it at each meeting, then yes. But we'll, prior to the next meeting, we'll help you in reformatting your agendas and making sure that appropriate public comment language is on there.
Okay. That's all I want to call out. I do want to, if I could take just a moment, Jeremy, are there any points that you want to bring to front on the business utilization report?
No, there aren't any points. We did have 6% total, 6.9% total for MWB, SBE utilization for Q3. So that's about it.
That concludes the points I want to raise on the purchasing agent's report.
Okay.
And I'm open, of course, for you to reach out to me with any questions you might have. Just email me.
Are we on to the discussion regarding proposed waiver process in 448-115?
Yes,
Is that in here somewhere?
it is. It's immediately following my report, and the memo from our department is prior to those reports. There you go, right there.
You want to walk us through that?
So, yeah, at the last meeting, which was a special call meeting in February, we had before us a number of waiver requests pursuant to MCL 4.48115. And included on the first page of this is that specific excerpt from the law. And it was related to the, sorry, I turned off the phone, but I didn't turn off the Apple Watch. Apologies.
Too much technology.
Yeah, we heard about some of your technology in your ear. But anyway, so the law is here before you, and at that meeting, we heard a number of waiver requests, and what came from this board was the request for us to establish some kind of a procedure for the board to follow when additional waiver requests are received. And so what I've outlined for you is a draft, the bolded, underlined, numbered, bulleted items are the steps and the process that I recommend. My other recommendation here, and Macy, get me on track if I get off, but I don't know if the board wants to add any of this as, in some manner to the regulations, or if you would prefer to keep this as a board procedure, which we have a number of board procedures. So whatever the board's desire would be related thereto. The process that I recommend for you is that we, first and foremost, I think one of the participants at the waiver request special call meeting said, how did this even come up here? Why is this an issue today? And the answer to that was simply that one of the prospective offers raised it as an issue. I don't know how to turn this off. I'm sorry.
Just keep fumbling with it.
But raised it as an issue, which drew to my attention that we did not have any specific language in our solicitations advising prospective offerors of the requirements set forth in the solicitation. How would you even know pre-procurement whether this was an issue? So the first step that I recommend is a modification of the solicitation language to advise any prospective offers of the language that's in the code that prohibits participation. If you are it's just like ESPN, that's all it is. I can't tell it to stop. If you are potentially, you've been engaged in prior engagements that might prohibit your participation in the specific solicitation. So I recommend modifying the solicitation language, advising all prospective offers who believe that they may have some prohibition from participation to disclose that, and to disclose it by the deadline for inquiries that's already established in the solicitation. And when they disclose this information, they would provide the specific project, what their specific participation in the project was, and the time frame for when these services were rendered. And with that same disclosure, it would include a statement from the prospective offeror that if they are determined to be prohibited from participating, that they would like to request a waiver. Or their specific request, because I think based on it, and I'm of course open to feedback to this, but the way that I review it, they would need to request a waiver. So if they are disclosing it, then to me what that means is that they think it could be an issue and they'd like a waiver. And they would indicate that in their disclosure by the inquiry's deadline. Any questions about that step?
So I'm just going back to that meeting where we had more than one party. And essentially, they did not understand that their work on as a preliminary consultant, for instance, on the East Bank, might prohibit them from working at all on any of the East Bank project over the however many acres, dozens of acres we're developing. So in your opinion, does this policy still permit the companies or individuals with subject matter expertise to participate in early phase consulting design and still participate in the work later?
Okay, I'm gonna get to that. Okay. So the next step in this process is once any disclosures are received, then I would have communication, discussion, in collaboration with the proponent departmental staff, as well as any procurement staff that are involved. That would be the buyer, the assistant, that would be the buyer, the assistant purchasing agent. And we would then review what was submitted, the projects that were submitted, and based on, advice and recommendations that we've received from Macy and her team, we would consider whether or not the definition of a particular matter or the scope of a related contract is generally solicited by the same metro entity, included in the same scope of work, or performed at the same location. So if those three things are present and true, then we would conclude that it meets the definition of being a particular matter as called out in the law. And that it would be, any related contract would also be, it would also define that related contract as being kind of the same, if you will, therefore creating the prohibition. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes, and those three factors, all three factors have to be present. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we wouldn't want to say, you've done work for, I'm gonna just call out planning because the East Bank project was released by them. You've done work by planning before, so therefore you can't do anything else. It would have to be all of those.
Okay.
The other consideration that I would take is whether or not the prospective offerer learned any kind of confidential information in the prior engagement, information that would provide them with an unfair advantage because it would not therefore be publicly available to all prospective offerers, and whether or not they designed the specifications and requirements for the project that's in question, that's the subject of the current solicitation. So in reviewing what projects they present, if we find that they've been solicited by the same metro entity and it's the same scope of work and it's at the same location, and that they've learned information that will provide them with unfair advantage that's not publicly available, and that they design those specifications and requirements, then they would be considered prohibited from participating. Our next step in the process would be then to advise all prospective offers of the prohibition that's been, identified for the specific offerer. Because I think that we do it that way because it's been not solicited, but submitted through the procurement portal. So it's specific to that procurement process. So I feel like we have to identify any prohibited vendors and make them known to all prospective offers. Once that has occurred, then the already submitted waiver request that came with the original disclosure would automatically be presented to the Procurement Standards Board. And my thinking is that the Procurement Standards Board would basically be doing a review of my review. I'm kind of setting, doing the initial work of determining, using the factors that I've identified, whether or not it appears to me that they should be prohibited. If I suggest that they should be prohibited, then the Procurement Standards Board has an opportunity to review my work, basically, and determine whether or not it meets the standard that's been established or has been identified, recommended to us by the law department. That is consistent with processes that we use for all kinds of procurement appeals.
So I missed the word then. So you're not talking about that as a part of the regular process, only if they appeal your decision that it is a particular matter, not as a part of the normal course.
It really becomes if they are prohibited. If they are prohibited, by virtue of their disclosure on the front end, it suggests that they want to have some certainty, or they want for us to ascertain whether or not they'll be able to go forward in the process. If they are prohibited, arguably, they could just say, okay, I'm prohibited and I don't want to further pursue the work. But my suggestion, and because of the way procurement processes move, is that we give them the opportunity there to also say, if they are prohibited, they want to request a waiver.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me ask my question better. So I understand they can request the waiver, but what I'm trying to read from this is, once they request the waiver, are you reviewing whether in fact the waiver is approved, or you're saying
No.
that comes to this board?
That comes to this board. I'm determining on the front end, because we had a number, just as an example, on the previous request for waivers that you all heard, we had a number of others that came, and our initial review was that there was no conflict, therefore it should not be prohibited. The only ones that came to this board were the ones that it was determined they should be prohibited from participation. I'm recommending that I engage a review of any requests or any disclosures using the criteria that are here. And then if I look at these and those questions are, yes, it was the same, department, the same scope of work, the same location. They provided services, basically, they wrote the specs and designed, the solicitation. They've got an unfair advantage. Then my recommendation would be that they be prohibited and they would be duly notified of such. They then have the right to have this board, consistent with the law, to review their request to participate anyway. I don't have the authority to approve their waiver request. Only this board does. I'm really trying to kind of weed through some of those
That's what I was
before
trying
they
to
get to you.
Because I remember part of the issue the last time was we didn't understand why is this even before us. And so I'm listening for the step that kind of takes care of that. And so are you saying that this step would take care of it because when they were here before, we were addressing whether or not they in fact needed a waiver?
They requested a waiver before. What was missing was a thorough vetting process before it got to the Procurement Standards Board. So basically with this process, what I'm recommending to the board is that you all allow me to interject myself as part of that instead of relying on the proponent department, and that we work in collaboration to determine whether or not services are considered prohibited using the filter or using the recommended process that the law department has given us. And I think that that will, kind of weed out a number of them because we've got some clear guidelines now of what kinds of things should prohibit you from participating. And if I determine that they are prohibited, this is almost, and I'm not an attorney, so you guys, the attorneys, I want to make that statement. But it gives them an opportunity from a due process standpoint to still have this board here without us having to take another 2 weeks in the procurement process for them to now come back and request a waiver separately. It's all happening in one process and it should save time.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Related, unrelated question. So if Company A and Company B both respond and neither one of them requests a waiver, but Company B thinks that A should have, because there's a conflict, do they always have that right, and does that go to the Procurement Appeals Board?
So if, my take on if that were to occur, and let's just say Company B ended up being awarded, I feel like Company A could absolutely protest.
But that would be through the.
That would be at the
existing
end of
process.
the. Mhm.
Okay, I'm just making sure
Yeah.
that people still have an opportunity.
I think it streamlines the process to allow them to ask for the waiver at the same time that they disclose. To say, here's this participation, and then if it's determined to be prohibited, we would like to request a waiver to be granted by the Procurement Standards Board.
It's just knowing how much work you guys do before things get to the appeals board.
Absolutely.
If this is an opportunity to fix it before it goes all the way down, but it doesn't sound like.
I think
There's a
based
way.
upon our last conversation, if I recall correctly, and Macy, you may remember this, I think what the advice that we received was that there was no recourse for the appeals board, but that they had to go to Chancery Court.
Yep, that's consistent with my recollection too.
Yeah. They'd have to go to Chancery Court because this board is already opined that their waiver is not granted. Now, that would only be in the case where you didn't grant the waiver.
Got it. Okay.
And then after this board hears, those waiver requests, of course, those participants have the right to be present. You would have all of the vetting information that I received. And of course, I would be accountable to you in terms of speaking to my logic around why it should be prohibited. And then you'd make a determination, it would be posted to the website.
When you very first began your remarks, you asked us, our thoughts
Your
around
preference.
two things. I don't remember what they were, but what are the pros and cons of each one?
So it was about whether or not you wanted this to remain as a procedure to the board. There are other procedures that are not spelled out in the procurement regulations. If it's a procedure to the board, it's subject to changes in administrative procedure, and of course, you'd have to approve the change as a board. In the regulations, I mean, it's, how you engage a process. It's a more legal process to make those changes. I think that you have more flexibility with a board procedure. But of course, it's up to you in terms of whether you think this is something that should be formalized in the procurement regulations, or if it should just stand as a procedure that the board will follow and instruct me to follow related to any potential, prohibitions from participation related to 4.48.115.
Anyone have preferences or thoughts?
Did I articulate that? Do you think I missed anything?
No, I think that was perfect.
Well, I'll just say my preference is someone who feels like they live their life with regulations, particularly when it comes to grants. I would prefer to see it just be a part of the process or procedure of the board rather than codifying it or whatever has to be done with code, whatever that process is. Yeah, just not go through.
I agree with Dr. Croom. I think that if it's in our policy, it's clear what it is, but it does give us more flexibility to make changes than if we had to go back and amend the ordinance and pass on 3 readings, and it takes 2 months or more to get that done. Sometimes I think we might want to have a little more flexibility to move and do something as an exception or change the policy more quickly than that process would be. So I agree.
I agree.
Do we need an action today? Do you like an action?
Do you think they have to adopt this procedure?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can move to adopt that procedure, but I don't think like in the future, we have to come back to this unless there's an actual request. You can, yeah, I think a vote on this would definitely be good.
Somebody make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. That all we got?
What's next?
Meeting date?
Next meeting date, I think Judy's got on here proposed August 30th.
Yeah, and as we've discussed, if the consultants are in town and this group's available, I think we'd be interested in a bring down of the disparity study results. Or that would be sometime late July, early August.
Let me go ahead and state I probably will not be present at that meeting, and that's okay. I just,
I would expect there'd be materials that we would circulate,
Yes.
right?
Yes, you'll have the executive summary. I mean, you'll have the full report, but it'll be voluminous and full of data points. The executive summary will be more concise and to the point of the findings and the recommendations.
we do know that's going into a holiday weekend, right?
What I will do is, once we have our,
August 30th?
Yeah, I think the.
I thought you were
holiday is
talking about the end of
September
July. I was like, well, there's another holiday I don't know about.
I will share, we'll reach out to the board prior to that on the day, because again, August 30th it's going to be late in the release process. And when they're in town to brief council.
No, I think she's just flagging for Dr. Crum.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I'll see, the date may be before August
I think
30th.
it'd be great if that were before and this were later, because I know, speaking for myself, with no council meetings in September, that's a much better month for
Yes.
me to meet for this board.
So what I'd like to do is just communicate on the dates that we're looking at to see if that works for board members, because I think you'll be interested in the findings.
Sure.
That's good.
Do you need a motion to adjourn? Sorry, did anyone have anything else? Oh, 2 things.
Am I missing something?
Sorry, I don't know how we got 36 minutes in without acknowledging Purchasing Agent Lane has a new grandbaby.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And he is actually pretty cute.
Yeah, he's
They're not all
adorable.
cute, but this one's cute.
I just, he's very cute.
And then congratulations to Miss Amos,
Oh
who
my
will
gosh.
not be here next time because she will have just had a baby.
I might be wishing I was here though, you know, like.
Oh, you're an old pro at it now. You're an old pro. You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Oh, motion to adjourn. Do we should do that?
We can just adjourn.
Thank you. You're not gonna whip out your camera and show a picture?
Okay.
Yeah, I want to see pictures.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.